So hello. Before to start, I would like to thank the organizers of this committee or this meeting to inviting me. And my name is Kamilla Khamzina, and I'm second year PhD student in Clermont Université, LabSco. And today I'm going to talk about how we can connect, maybe, social representations research with minority influence. So, the theoretical and empirical works of Serge Moscovici have broadened the research in social psychology. Sorry.
The other one, because otherwise our technician in the back says you will not be recorded. So if you want to stand,
Au pire, je peux m'asseoir.
just use this one.
C'est bon?
Keep it close.
D'accord.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the theoretical and empirical works of Serge Moscovici have broadened the research in social psychology. And all these problematic that he has examined are still under the examination and of the actuality in research today. In my work, I'll be interested particularly in two research domains, such as the minority influence and the social representation theory. Up until 70s, Serge Moscovici, a lot of scholars have argued that the only majority can influence our attitudes and behavior. However, Serge Moscovici was one of the first of social psychologists who told not only the majority, but also the minority who can influence our attitudes and behavior via its unanimous and consistent behavioral style. Another contribution, which is very, very important for social psychology, is his theory of social representation. However, to our knowledge, the link that can be made between the two of these social problematics is not yet examined. So the goal of my talk today will be to propose maybe some models that can link these two research domains. To begin with, I would like to present you a recent study of Serge Guimond, Michel Strait, and Elodie Roebroeck, the researchers from Clermont Université, who have studied within their representative sample of 1,000 persons the social representation of multiculturalism in France. As you know, a lot of scholars have studied the integration policies such as the assimilation and multiculturalism that are really very different. Because on the one hand, the assimilation policy postulates that the minority should give up their culture, their cultural characteristic, in order to adapt to the mainstream group. And it is linked positively with the prejudice and ethnocentrism. On the other hand, the multiculturalism is the alternative to the assimilation, because the principle of the multiculturalism is that we should promote the cultural diversity by acknowledging the group identities of each ethnic group. And it's negatively linked to the prejudice and the ethnocentrism. However, all these scholars have studied only the personal attitudes towards these policies and not the social representation or perceived norm of that. Though we know that the integration policies are the ideologies that are shared by the members of one given group or one given society. So as the multiculturalism and assimilation were studied as something that is located within an individual's mind, Guimond and collaborators have decided to study more deeply the perceived norm or the social representation of it in France by using the very representative sample of 1,000 persons in France. In 2013, Guimond and collaborators have developed the measure of perceived norm by adding the phrases such as most French think that or believe that in the beginning of the item measuring the personal attitude. We assume that the perceived norm is something that is shared because it's the belief about the other's belief. So it's the belief that people hold about others who believe in something. So it's something that is shared by the members of one group. And these perceptions do not necessarily reflect the personal attitudes, according to the phenomena of pluralistic ignorance of Pérez and Miller. Because very often, we can perceive others to think very differently from us. But in fact, it's not the reality. For example, in France, we can hear on the we can hear on the radio or on TV that people are against the multiculturalism because multiculturalism has failed or something bad. But in fact, people in France can be positively, personally for the multiculturalism. And this is exactly what was found in France. Because, as you can see on the graph, considering the measure of the perceived norm in France, French population is perceived to hold more assimilistic opinions. However, it's not the case for the personal attitudes, because the French people are personally positive towards the multiculturalism and not for the assimilation. So this result can tell us that social representation and personal attitudes are two things very different, and it cannot reduce each to other. So if we assume that the perceived norm is something that is shared by the group of people, so we shouldn't vary across the socio-demographic characteristics. And this was the case because there is no effect of sex, age, or political orientation on the perceived norm. It means that women and men, young and old people, left-wing partisans or extreme right-wing partisans are all perceive that the French population hold the more assimilistic opinions. However, it's not the case for the personal attitudes, because we have found the effects of sex, age, and political orientation on the personal attitudes. Sorry. And as you can see on the graph, that the only group in France that holds the assimilistic opinions is the extreme right wing partisans. The fact that the extreme right partisans hold more assimilistic opinions is not a surprise. The striking is the fact that this population is only 20% of the sample, of the representative sample in French population. So, taking all together, according to Guimond, Strait, and Roebroeck, most French people hold are more favorable for the multiculturalism and not for assimilation. But they are not aware of that because they believe that others around them are more personally favorable for the assimilation. So this is the phenomenon of pluralistic ignorance of Prentice and Miller. And the striking is the fact in these results is that the only far right-wing partisans are favorable personally for the assimilation. But we have the social representation in France that all French people are favorable for the assimilation. So this minority position is erroneously believed to be the normative position of the majority. Serge Moscovici in the 70s and 80s has proposed that the minority position can influence our attitudes and behavior. Based on the result of Guimond and collaborators of 2015, one may assume that before acting on our attitudes and behavior, minority position can pass by the social representation about the beliefs of others in France, for example, like here in this study. And this strategy can be very powerful and influential when it targets a change in social representation rather than change in perceived norm. Because if you want to be the member of one given group, and if we perceive that others in our group hold this type of opinions, so by being the member of this group, maybe we'll change our mind. That was found by Lewis and collaborators in Australia because the white Australians expressed publicly their prejudiced attitudes towards the immigrants from Asia when they perceived that other Australians around them are favorable for the anti-immigrant politics. Recently, Porteligna and El-Charot have studied the question why the minority can become a mainstream group. Because, you know, at the moment of the study of Guimond collaborators from 2015, it was in the February 2011, the National Front, the extreme right parties were the minority, but with a very, very consistent message in the area of politics. And so Portelinia and El-Sharot have studied this question, why the minority can become a majority. And they propose the following. Firstly, our perceived norm can be very malleable, and it can be shaped simply by the mass media, by everything if you want. So, if I perceive that others are for the National Front, so it will change my public behavior and the public behavior of others, because perceiving that others think differently from us, we will be less keen to express our privative attitude. And this will lead to the reinforcement in our change of the perceived norm. It's like the vicious circle. So, as we infer the norm from the public behavior of others, and if no one expresses their privative attitudes, so we will perceive that, okay, others are okay with the National Front, so everything is fine. And recently, our research have shown that there are some negative psychological consequences of the pluralistic ignorance, and especially for women. We have shown that, that the women, when they feel that their personal attitudes do not match with the perceived norm, their level of well-being and life satisfaction is lower when then they perceive that it's matched. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the recent research of Serge Guimond, Michel Strait, and Elodie Roebroeck in 2015, documenting the discrepancy that exists in France between the personal attitudes and the normative perception, or the perceived norm, highlights the fruitfulness of the contributions of Serge Moscovici to the social psychology. And the minority influence is a critical mechanism in the accounting for the social change. And however, the change in the perceived norm, in the social representation, and not in the personal attitudes, is a mechanism that can relate, maybe, the minority influence to the social change. Thank you for your attention.